Welcome, everyone. We'll get underway in just about a minute. So welcome to our session on how to write a statement of grant purpose with representatives from CLS and Boren. Again, welcome, and we'll get underway in about one more minute. Okay, with that, I think we can get started. Wonderful. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being a part of the We Represent conference. We're very glad to have you here for this particular session, for all the sessions, but really to use this time for you to engage in a great dialogue with people that have gone through the process. So those who have taken the time to go through the Boren and CLS scholarship processes to enhance and be part of their study abroad portfolio. So during this time, we'll have two representatives, so Sheen and Jeff, share a little bit more about their experiences. They'll each share a presentation, as well as, I think the most important part is be available for questions. So what are those specific questions that you have, when it comes to the completion of the scholarship? Are there certain tips or guidance that you're seeking about creating the right narrative to put forward based upon their own personal experiences? And so I want to thank you for attending as members, and of course, thank you in advance to our panelists. A few logistics before we start. So feel free to use the Q&A function that you should be able to see at the bottom of each of your respective screens. Kat and myself will be monitoring the questions and making sure to forward them to our panelists as we go through. If for some reason that doesn't work for you, it is okay to use the chat function as well. So we'll keep an eye on both parts that is there. So again, welcome. First, just a little bit about who I am. So my name is Matt Castrina. I'll be your moderator for this panel session. I'm excited to join you all because this is also something frankly new for me. My abroad experience was a different path. And so, but knowing the value and the presence that CLS and Boren have in this area, I'm really excited to hear from these two individuals as part of our time together. So again, we look forward to your questions. Please pass them along, and we'll make sure to give enough time for questions before we wrap up at the end. All right. Our first panelist will be Sheen. So Sheen Atwa will be speaking on CLS and his experience. And so who better to introduce Sheen than yourself? So I'm going to turn the mic over to you. All right, Sheen.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you all for participating in this. I'm very happy to be a part of the We Present to represent the Critical Language Scholarship. So as Matt said, my name is Sheen Atwa. I am a dual recipient of the Critical Language Scholarship. My first study abroad was in Tangier, Morocco in 2016, studying Arabic. And then afterwards, I was awarded the Critical Language Scholarship again to study Swahili in Arusha, Tanzania in 2018. I'm a recent graduate of Columbia University, where I researched the ethno-linguistic connections between East and North Africa. My focus was the changes in identity after social movements. Before attending Columbia University, I was a first-generation community college student at Georgia State University Perimeter College, where I double majored in political science and foreign languages. While in community college, I worked for the International Rescue Committee, interpreting for Iraqi and Syrian refugees. Currently, I'm running an online forum that teaches colloquial Arabic and focuses on cultural competency.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheen. So with that, Sheen, we'll have you actually maybe as you start to pull up your presentation, before we do, maybe we'll just have Jeff introduce himself, and then Sheen will first start with your presentation. So Jeff, if you could introduce yourself to the group.
Sure. Thank you, Matt, and thanks, Sheen. I'm Actually, I am an alum of Boren. I did 2005 Boren fellowships quite some time ago to Jordan. This is the Roman city of Jerash in northern Jordan. Um, and it was a terrific experience. I studied Arabic at Yarmouk University and then kind of parlayed that experience into a little over 8 years as a foreign service officer with the State Department, including a tour in Syria. And having studied Arabic in Jordan was, I think, both critical to getting into the foreign service and also um, getting that particular posting. So the reason I'm here presenting specifically, though, is because I work on the Boren Awards now at IIE, and our essays have changed a bit in the last couple of years. So I wanted to make sure that you guys all get the best, most up-to-date information on how to write these essays as we can provide. Some of you attended a presentation from my colleague Kyle Cox last night, so this is sort of a companion piece to that.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so we'll have each presenter, starting with Sheen, walk through a little bit about the COS and Boren scholarships respectively. And I already see there's a question in there. So as you have questions, please to add them, and we'll make sure to you spend some time to address it. So great, thank you, Sheen.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jeff, for that. That's awesome. Have another Arabic speaker. Shows you kind of really what can happen when you kind of apply for these awards and get them. So that's why we're all here. So yeah, I'm going to present a little bit on the critical language scholarship. Finding my purpose in international exchange. I think finding our purpose in life in general is just hard, but we can focus a little bit on international exchange and how we can kind of get better results in our application process. So 3 points I kind of want to bring up, and I want everyone to have in their mind when you're creating an outline for your statement of purpose, and you can use these points also when we're speaking about like kind of the program specific questions, is we want to think about the why, the how, and the then. This is a great outline to kind of keep for when we're writing any kind of outline, any kind of narrative. I think these are extremely important for the program specific questions, but also I think maybe just in life in general, asking before we do something, why, how, and then, then what happens afterwards. So I'm going to start with why. This is a friend of mine in the picture, Eric. He studied with me in Tangier, Morocco. I think you can tell by his face, he's definitely asking himself why, what am I doing here? Kind of really contemplating his experience right now. But when we talk about why, we want to ask why is kind of what the experiences that have led you to become interested in this language or this culture. It can be anything such as history, movies, food, a research project, music, or maybe just the language itself. Maybe you've heard it spoken and you think it's nice. The way you become interested or involved in the language varies for so many different types of people. I had a friend who did CLS in Japan, and he said, yeah, most of the cohort, most of the people who apply, their first introduction to Japanese was through anime. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be just like, a research project that you've been working on for 10 years. Your interest can stem from so many different things. But you do want to kind of answer that question, why? What made you interested in it? And you want to focus on these interests and kind of connect them to your experiences. How? So when you ask how, it's kind of, we talk about it in a more, I guess, present tense sense. So what are you doing now to engage the language or culture? Maybe you can show some consistency or continuity in the sense of, I started learning a language or going, engaging in the culture, and now currently I'm continually doing that. And you want to kind of think of like academic and professional examples of how this works. So maybe you're volunteering. Maybe you created a study group at a restaurant that speaks the language, that's part of the culture that you go to every weekend. You want to kind of show that there's consistency in your interest and in your efforts to kind of be engaged with that language. If you have if you're in school and you're learning it, great. I can say specifically for myself and for some other CLSers that we weren't always studying the language when we applied for the scholarship. So for example, when I applied for Morocco, I wasn't in an Arabic class, but I had experience in Egypt where I had worked, where I could use that. So it doesn't have to be that you're in an academic program or professional setting now, but you want to think about when you were, or if you are doing it, you definitely want to add that to part of your outline for your statement of purpose. And then we have then. Then seemed like the more easier one, but you definitely want to have concrete kind of examples. So what are you going to use this language and culture for? How is the cultural competency going to be useful for you in your academic career or your professional career? So you want to kind of be, again, kind of show this consistency that you have a plan and what you want to do. It could be career, it could be academic, or it could be personal. It could be personal in the sense of maybe you volunteer, like I volunteered at the International Rescue Committee, and I used my Arabic, and this ended up becoming a job afterwards. So it transitioned from kind of personal use to career use. And for me personally, I am Egyptian American, so there is that kind of more personal part of speaking the Arabic language. So if that is something that is a part of your identity, then definitely want to add that to this kind of idea. I want to be able to kind of use this language in a more familiar, usage later on. And for this, I will move on to, went too far there, to kind of more CLS specific questions. So the first question that CLS asked, not much has changed. I applied and I got the Arabic in 2016. But these are questions from 2020, so don't worry that I'm still up to date. I'm not giving you old information from 5 years ago. But one of the first kind of questions that they ask is about resilience. So based on your exposure to and experiences with different cultures, what are some strategies for interacting with people who are different from you or situations that you are unfamiliar? So examples of this can be, for example, if you, ideas of privacy, right? Or ideas of kind of personability or closeness, right? We kind of don't want to assume when we're thinking about other cultures that it's going to be exactly the same as we were brought up specifically in America, or how we kind of go through our culture. So how did we kind of familiarize ourselves with another culture, but also how did we become more flexible and tolerant and adapt to it? So these things can be, as I mentioned, like ideas of closeness or privacy, or it could be things as deep as maybe politics or religion. So you kind of want to give examples of how to adapt to these new environments or situations. So maybe you volunteer with a group who is part of this culture or this language, and you kind of learn how to traverse the different cultural nuances in it. And maybe you had study abroad or you worked abroad experience that you can use and show how you were adapt and open to different cultures, but it doesn't always have to be in another country. We can think of ways that we interact with groups that we don't necessarily identify with, could be from different faiths, backgrounds, or identities, and how we kind of learn how to interact with different types of people. So it always doesn't have to have a grounding in abroad or a different country. A good rule for this is kind of always asking questions if you're unsure. So never assuming that some strategy will work because it worked one time with a specific person or group, that's going to work with everybody who's in that specific group. You kind of want to ask questions, kind of make sure that you're not stepping on any toes in a sense. So for example, in Morocco or in just Arab culture in general, you usually take your shoes off before you enter a house. These kind of things, or you could ask about, like, well, ask if you're going into someone's house, is it okay? Do I have to take my shoes off? You can ask like the cultural reasoning behind it. So these types of things, just be open and kind of questioning, like, okay, why is this kind of done in this way? So we have preparation. So for preparation, it's we kind of want to explore kind of what makes us diverse, kind of highlighting those skills that are that make us unique, and how we can utilize those kind of skills and identities abroad. When we go to a new a study abroad program, you're not only interacting with people who are in those countries, you're also interacting with the cohort that you went to. Specifically for CLS, you're going to be with around 20 to 30 different people who are from have different life experiences and different identities from the United States. So you want to be able to kind of explain how you can prepare yourself for just being introduced to an entirely new culture, but how you can also work in a group setting. And also, while this is you're doing cultural activities, but also an intense language program. For example, I can say, for me, when I applied for the CLS in 2016, I was in community college, and I was a non-traditional student. So I spoke about how my age might be seen sometimes as a hindrance, but it can actually be a benefit for me in the sense that I can take on maybe a leadership role. And in other ways, for example, being Egyptian American or Arab American and being Muslim, I can use that in the sense of in Morocco, I can kind of give a better idea of what Americans, kind of how I live in my life in America. That being Muslim or Arab isn't necessarily a hindrance, that kind of quelling some of those maybe rumors or unfound kind of facts overseas that people might hear about. So these are ways you can use your identity in positive ways. Going off of that, citizens diplomacy. This is a very, very important thing. We want to think about this is an exchange program. There's going to be reciprocity, right? So we kind of want to make sure that we speak about how we are going to gain kind of this cultural competency, and we're going to gain these language skills at a high level, while also introducing different parts of, if it's identity or work experiences into the country we're studying abroad in. So we want to kind of put into this because it's something that you kind of want to promote a mutual understanding between the countries. And it's just kind of one of the key things that kind of CLS focuses on, and a lot of the kind of State Department programs for study abroad focus on the citizen diplomacy. How can we traverse the different ways that we interact with people abroad, but also together? And of course, one of the more important ones here is commitment to language study. So for this, you definitely want to focus on the kind of the future. So how are you going to use this language when you return, or when you have different types of academic or professional plans? So in the same way you were maintaining the language, before when you were applying, how can you continue that when you come back from your study abroad? So maybe it's private tutors, maybe you start volunteering, or maybe you look for jobs in the region. So you definitely want to be clear about your plans to how you're going to use this in the future. Thing too, that's actually, because of the coronavirus, we are all online. But it's actually sometimes becomes a good thing. It's much easier now to interact and to find groups where we can use languages. There are tons of resources out there for volunteer-based programs where you can just practice the language. A lot of them are from, for example, CLS alumni, Boren alumni, Fulbright alumni. So those are people who kind of created these forums that you want to just, where people can practice and maintain their languages. Everything does not have to be formal. You can think of informal ways that you're using your language. As I mentioned, You can go to a restaurant, continue to go to a restaurant, volunteer at a restaurant, even work at a restaurant that speaks the language or is part of the culture. These are things that could be a part of it. And also, obviously, if you have an academic or professional plan, if you do maybe foreign service, or if you want to go to grad school and apply for these other programs, it's definitely something you want to talk about. There needs to be an idea of how you're going to use this language continually in the future, which, now again, it's, we are further away, but sometimes that does bring us closer. Probably a very important part. The tweet is, my mom didn't raise a quitter, but she did raise a procrastinator. Yes, this is such an important thing to kind of realize. If you have the skills to write these statement of purpose and kind of have an idea of what you want to speak about for answering the questions, that's great. But just like the CLS cohort and just like the cultural exchange, you want to kind of build a support system. Reach out to former colleagues, former professors, even siblings, if you trust them to edit your essays. But definitely you want to edit, you want to revise, and you want to review. If you couldn't tell why I took this tweet, is because myself, I'm a procrastinator, as I threw together my presentation 10 minutes before. No, but definitely you want to find people who are going to edit, revise, and review. You want to make sure that you have a strong idea of what you want to do, and it's clear in your writing. My writing for essays aren't necessarily good. I can speak about them a little bit better, but put them on paper is hard. So I have people who can help me, find errors and kind of make sure my sentences are more clear. So just to kind of recap, keep thinking of the narrative and when you answer these questions in a why, how, and then frame. Make sure that you connect your experiences with your interests. So, make sure that these experiences you have, it can be vice versa. Either the interest has influenced your experiences and you saw more experiences, or your experiences have increased your interest in a certain subject. You want to make sure you make that connection. 3, be a citizen diplomat. Again, this is one of the more important ones for CLS and a lot of the other programs. This is an exchange. Try not to go into it with an idea of like, what can I gain out of it? You want to go into it with the idea also of, what can I bring? How can I make this better? And because we we represent, and we are talking about the varying ways of identities and how we're underrepresented, this is a very thing that we can focus on and kind of really expand on. And the 4th and the last is edit, revise, and review. Most important thing, I think 5 minutes before my presentation, I realized I spelled language wrong for critical language scholarship. So it's a good thing I took a quick look before I started it. Thank you for your participation. This is a cat in Morocco that was sleeping in front of a blue door. I just thought it was nice to kind of end on a nice note.
Sheen, thank you so much, and agreed. I think can always, take a good cat in front of a door to sort of, and something positive on there. So I want to sort of elevate, I think, some of your one is about sort of the why. And I think it's for everyone sort of participating and listening, that's also why, but also why now. And I think where you talked about the edit, review, and sharing those examples, that really sort of speaks to that. Sheen, thank you so much. Again, as you have questions, please add them to the Q&A, and we'll make sure to grab other questions at the end. So now that we've heard about CLS, I want to take some time to gain some insights about the Boren Award. So Jeff, if you could start to share about Boren, and look forward to, and again, people use the Q&A and we'll get forward. So Jeff.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, just confirm for me that it's visible now.
Looks great, thank you.
So I am going to give a very kind of condensed version of about half of the presentation that we would normally give to cover the essays for the Boren Awards. But if anybody ever wants to do a deeper dive, we definitely have a lot more information available on our website, including this full presentation. The structure of these presentations, of these We Represent meetings, were kind of about the personal statement on the one hand and the statement of grant purpose on the other. And I know that every nationally competitive award, every scholarship for study abroad or language study has variations on these types of essays. But I will say that the application essays for the Boren Awards are a little unusual and a little specific to it, because Boren has this very strong focus on applying the skills that you develop to careers in the federal government. Now, last night, my colleague Kyle covered what is sort of closest to our personal statement, which is a essay about the career plan that you want to set out. And in that essay, you also cover things like your resilience and adaptability, like the questions that Sheen was covering for CLS. Tonight is, I understand, more about the statement of grant purpose. And so the closest thing that I could say that we have for that for Boren is essay number 1, which is the famous / infamous national security essay. Because this is part of the national security education program, and because this is tied specifically to a career with the federal government later on, we really want to see that people can appreciate the national security implications of what it is that they have studied academically and of the languages and countries that they are planning to study overseas. But the term national security can often be kind of intimidating. So I want to hopefully clarify in a few slides that no matter what field you're coming from, no matter what you have studied previously, no matter what you were interested in academically, you can frame that in terms of U.S. national security. Very briefly, we have a few different kinds of essays. There's a study plan summary. There's an optional research abstract and methodology, which is for graduate students who are applying. And as I noted earlier, essay number 2 is that career-focused personal statement. What I want to focus on here is what we call the national security argument. This is primarily an analytical piece. This is not so much a personal statement, but if you want to be successful in this, connecting this in a clear way to your own academic interests and professional goals that you lay out in the second essay and elsewhere in your application is going to be very important. I just came off of facilitating the selection panels for the Boren Scholarships and the Boren Fellowships, and as has been the case in previous years, I want to tell you about 2 things that I see people do all the time that I really want to warn you against. Number 1 is making a national security argument that is either super broad or just completely detached from any evident academic history that you have. The ones that are far more interesting are the people that drill way down into a specific topic that they have a strong academic knowledge of. It comes through, and I'll talk more about that later on. The other big pitfall that I see, and this is particularly true of people who would otherwise be extremely strong applicants, right? Their grades are spectacular. Their letters of recommendation are spectacular. They've been studying Arabic or Mandarin or Portuguese or Swahili for 2-3 years now, but they don't succeed. And why is it? It's because they recycle essays. People look at these essays and they go, you know what, this is a terrific essay, beautifully written. It was clearly written for Fulbright. Boren essays are different. They do need to be composed separately. So let me kind of break down how we tackle essay number 1, national security, and how you can have the best chance of succeeding and having this essay stand out to the selection panelists. So this is the prompt. It's very basic. Explain the significance of your proposed country, region, and language to U.S. national security. We recognize a broad definition, but you need to make a specific, detailed, and focused argument. And if I could add a phrase to the end of that, which unfortunately it is not within my power to do unilaterally, I would say specific, detailed, and focused argument relevant to your own academic interests and professional goals, right? Not specific, detailed, and focused from, some objective point of view. What does this have to do with you? Make that connection, but you don't necessarily need to do it with a lot of like first person statements or your personal history. Just make sure that all of the dots that you put on this application connect to each other and kind of meet here in this first essay. So let me tackle this question of what is national security, right? Most people hear this phrase and they think defense, they think intelligence, they think sort of hard security issues. But I can tell you that it is far, far, far broader than that. Any element of US public policy, anything that the federal government does, is an element of national security. So, of course, this is going to include topics like national defense, it's going to include diplomacy, it's going to include intelligence work. And some of you are going to be interested in that, and many of you are applying for Boren specifically because you want to pursue these careers. But I'll tell you, some of the essays that stand out the most are the ones that take a slightly different tack, and they take that tack because that's actually where the interest of the applicant lies. So let's unpack a few of the other concepts that national security encompasses. It can include economic development. It can include democracy and governance. Both of these topics are very important to USAID, for example. Environment and sustainability. This picture comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which does a lot of international cooperation on these questions. Food security and agriculture. Here's a picture from a USDA-sponsored trade fair on agricultural products and agricultural machinery and techniques in Pakistan. Again, very important to U.S. foreign affairs. Public health and disease prevention. Now, when I put this picture on the slide, this perhaps was not the most salient issue in the world. Now it is. So people who talked about this a couple of years ago really stood out. You will continue to stand out if this is actually your focus. Cybersecurity is super important. So for those of you coming from the STEM fields, engineering, etc., go deep. We love to hear about this stuff. Immigration, all aspects of it. Anyone who's interested in any support to immigration processes can be should talk about that in the application. Trade and commerce. So for those of you coming from the business side of the house, still very important, as is financial regulation. A lot of people go back and forth between banks, investment organizations, investment companies, and regulatory agencies. Telecommunications, energy. So again, for people with a STEM bent, there are a lot of different ways to frame the question of national security, but you need to pick the one that's most relevant to you. And then disaster response, again, super important aspect of national security and very related to what I know a lot of you are doing in the humanitarian space. So what is national security? If I can encompass it, it's anything that protects and promotes the well-being of the United States on the international stage. Any topic can be framed in these terms, but it's up to you, the applicant, to show that you understand that connection in the essay. Here's a nice thought experiment I like to do when I tell people how to kind of draft this essay. It's 800 words. That's 4 to 6 paragraphs. That would be about 5 minutes of anybody's time if you were talking very quickly. So imagine it like this. Think of a topic that you know extremely well. And imagine that you're sitting across the table from a random member of Congress. You don't know anything about this person. You don't know this person's politics. You don't know anything about their district. All you know is that you need to convince them in 5 minutes that something you are interested in academically is relevant to U.S. national security, is relevant to them and their constituents. So in 5 minutes, make that argument. Why should this topic matter to them and their constituents? So don't go way down in the weeds on the topic in a way that only an academic would understand, but also don't make this too sort of non-specific or high-minded. Not to say that it's a bad thing to have that backing you up, but this is not an exercise in telling us how much you believe in something. It's an exercise in showing us how much you know about something and how well you can analyze a particular issue. So that's the thought experiment I'd encourage you to take into this essay. I think this is also true, though, of a lot of different essays, true of CLS essays, true of Fulbright essays, that you need to assume that the person reading it knows zero about you, knows zero about the award that you're applying for even. Go in there and try to explain everything without the prompt being in front of them. So this thought experiment, I think, is helpful to kind of take your eye off the national security prompt specifically and think about, how would I explain this to a random person I don't know, but who should care. So here are a few do's and don'ts, right? Do write a persuasive essay. Don't write a research paper. Okay, this is not where you do a bunch of parenthetical citations. It's going to eat up your word count. If you're going to cite a fact, you can state it as long as it's something that can be easily verified by anybody doing a Google search, right? Address the national security argument based on your own academic interests and future career goals. One thing that pains me to see is when somebody decides that, say a computer engineer wants to go to Jordan to study Arabic, and they have their reasons for wanting to do that. But in the national security argument, they decide to focus on water resource management or refugee issues that are not actually in their academic wheelhouse. They just know that these issues are important, right? They were in the New York Times or The Economist recently, so that must be what's important to talk about on this essay. It would be far more interesting if that person talked about the intersection of computer science or cybersecurity or whatever with Arabic, with the Middle East, right? Than to try to write about what they think we want to hear. Because everybody else is going to be writing about whatever issue is the most salient. It would be much better if you pick the one that's actually academically relevant to you. So don't make that national security argument too general. And I'll jump to the fourth don't point. Don't give us what I call the Wikipedia overview of U.S. relations with the country. And what I mean by this is like each paragraph is a different, distinct, discrete topic in, U.S. Moroccan or U.S. Chinese or U.S. Polish bilateral relations. Far better to spend all 4 or 5 of those paragraphs focused on the same topic and then explaining explicitly why that's relevant to the United States. So again, explain the relevance, make sure that that connection is explicit. Don't count on the people reviewing your application to connect those dots for you. And don't feel the need to justify your country's inclusion on our list. You do not need to state Jordan is an important ally of the United States. Explain why, if it's relevant to your topic, but don't list off all the different meetings that the two countries have held. Or if you're talking about China, don't start with Nixon's trip to China unless you are a historian studying Nixon's trip to China. So that's some general advice. Keep it focused, keep it personally connected to yourself, but make it analytical. And if you have any questions during this process, please reach out to us. We are always available. We will do one-on-one meetings with applicants who are interested in applying. Boren@iie.org is our email address. 1-800-618-NCEP is where you can reach us by phone. But our website also has a tremendous amount of guidance on this essay and all of the others. So let me not eat up any more of the time. Happy to take any questions that there might be.
Jeff, thank you so much. Thank you for walking us through, particularly I think the specific do's and the don'ts. I think what really jumped out also was, when you think of something like national security, you just default to oftentimes a defense or intelligence or the diplomatic point of view, and it's really much broader and comprehensive than that. And a good reminder about that. I see there was one question that did come through, but I'm going to maybe flip it a little bit and share this with both Sheen and Jeff. And so I think the question was specifically about mental health, and is does an applicant's mental health or the assessment of their mental health somehow connect to the ability of the applicant receiving the award or receiving the grant? I believe for both groups, and I saw that we had a written answer that first, that no one is discriminated about, mental health or as far as any history or things like that. But I think maybe the flip of it is first, where does maybe, if one wants to maybe weave mental health as part of that story, because that's something of who they are, how might that be conveyed through either one of their essays for these respective programs? And maybe Sheen, I'll just start with you, and then maybe we'll go to Jeff then.
That's a good question. Mental health is obviously a very important thing, and it can be very, affect the day-to-day life. That's a very important question asked about, whether it increases or decreases your chances. It does not decrease your chances. You will not be discriminated against because you of any mental health history. But as Matt is asking, yes, you could possibly use this in a way that kind of shows your adaptability and your flexibility, right? Dealing with mental health issues or having a history of mental health issues. These are things, maybe how you taught people about, whatever mental health issue you may have, how you interact with people and inform them of, look, I have X, Y, and Z. Here's how, you should interact with me, or here's how, I interact with other people. So in the same way, when you're kind of having this idea of exchange reciprocity, how you want to be treated, and also how you kind of have spoken with people about it. So it can be it can be weaved into the story where you kind of speak about how you were able to overcome certain aspects of mental health history and a lot of the stigmas that surround it specifically. Using this in a sense of abroad undoubtedly would be something you could possibly weave in the sense of, I have X, Y, and Z, so maybe this country doesn't necessarily focus on that or don't have the resources. This is something that you can bring and speak about in your essay, and I think it'd be very, very useful.
I think it's a very important question, and what I want to start off by saying is that it's really important to highlight that Boren, as well as CLS, as well as Fulbright, as well as Gilman, all of these U.S. government-funded study awards are trying to accommodate everyone. We want everyone to be able to participate in this. And sometimes, and excuse me if I get the terminology wrong here, but sometimes if, there is a physical or mental health issue, sometimes people couch these as disabilities, sometimes not. But if there are issues that may need reasonable accommodation, it is important to disclose those and to understand that additional funding is available beyond the maximum award to help support you. So if, for example, you had a physical disability like using a wheelchair, or you needed, you're deaf or blind and needed support for that, that is the sort of thing that we can definitely accommodate. When it comes to the less visible issues, mental health, we have plenty of people that participate in this program that are dealing with, things like depression or anxiety, and other issues, and are, being treated for it and are able to continue to, receive treatment, take medication, go to therapy while they're overseas. It does not necessarily need to be something that you disclose in your application. In the Boren Award's second essay, there is a bit about, and Kyle covered this last night, but there is a bit about challenges overcome. I have seen essays that tackle some very difficult challenges, and some do it better than others. One of the things I think that is very important to be aware of with Boren, and I would say kind of more so than CLS, because CLS is, also the program provider, right? They've got on-site monitoring and things like that, is that Boren allows you to take the money and apply it to other programs. And many of these university-funded study abroad programs are going to have that same kind of support, but not all of them will. And so we want anybody that's applying to go overseas to understand that this is inherently difficult, right? To leave the country that you grew up in, to leave your usual support network. And so please go into that with open eyes, and please also convey in your essays that if you go abroad, you are going to be taking care of yourself, right? So that you can succeed in the program, so that you have a good experience. That's a very complicated answer, but hopefully what I've conveyed is that yes, it's open to everybody. Yes, you should, continue to look after your own health while you're abroad and prioritize that. But just be aware that it's inherently challenging.
Well, thank you. And I think that speaks to, I think, why we're also here, with what we represents is that idea of inclusivity and recognizing how do we, take that part of ourselves and sort of weave that into the narrative, and also speaks to, I think I want to uplift something Jeff you shared is that, as you think about, as you apply to the different scholarships, be mindful of not just what the audience is looking for, but also who you are and how you write that, and know that there are different ways to use the different grants and opportunities that are out there. So thank you. We have time just for one final question. It's really just sort of that ultimate, just sort of closing type of question, which is that final, word of advice. So if there's one particular, key message or a key part that you really wanted to emphasize and as a takeaway, for the members of our audience here, what would that be? And so I'm going to maybe flip the script, and Jeff, we'll start with you, and then we'll end with Sheen.
I think I kind of got this across when I was talking about sort of how to take an analytical essay and connect it to yourself. But one of the things that seems to be the X factor for Boren applicants, and I mean everyone from a zero prior language study beginner to someone that has been, is basically continuing their 12th year of Portuguese study or something like that, is that oh, hold on, I lost my train of thought.
That good X factor, right?
Yes. Yes. The X factor is that you get the sense that people are doing this, that they are interested in national security, they are interested in studying a language, and they are interested in a federal career themselves, that they are not saying what they think we want to hear. And I know it's hard to sort of like explain how sincerity is conveyed. I can just say that it really seems to clearly in the best applications that you can tell that this person is doing what they want to do because they want to do it, and they have very good intrinsic reasons for that.
Great. And Sheen,
thank you
for
helping
Jeff.
Me jog that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And Sheen, just maybe in a quick 30 seconds, what would be your final word of advice and thing to note?
I would say just, as far as studying languages and this kind of idea, just don't be afraid of the language's difficulty. If you're interested in studying it, you're already halfway done, because most of language learning is dedication anyway. So don't give up, just keep looking for resources and support.
Excellent.
Everyone can be multilingual. That's absolutely true.
Very true. Very true. Jeff, Sheen, thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentations, your insight, your experiences, answering our questions that we had here. Everyone, please remember after we wrap up, there is a survey to complete. So please take the time to complete the survey. Not only does it give us great feedback, it gives you the opportunity to hopefully be awarded some great opportunities, such as raffle ticket opportunities and other sort of great incentives and awards. So complete the survey. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of the conference, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.